before the button goes.
You're
Never
fine.
mind, it did.
That's fine.
So I live in upstate New York. I grew up in a very small town in Texas, but I also grew up in Los Angeles because I had one parent in each.
Got
So
it.
That's fun.
I have learned from a very young age to adapt to very different realities.
Environment.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think actually just saying that I think is kind of interesting considering the topic that we're going to talk about because I want to talk about it in relation to support because I think the reality of the topic is different for us than it is for like engineering and product. So that topic is like Colin brought up a really interesting hot take in our hot takes channel and the Elevate Slack a couple weeks ago where we all have a lot of opinions and share them freely and often about the overcomplication of systems and things in our now just like in our everyday life.
Mhm.
Like generally in technology, but it's really our everyday life now because technology is kind of taking over our life. And Colin, do you mind if I read your post verbatim?
Yeah, by all
Okay, so
means.
the pernicious characteristic impulse of engineers. He's
Sorry,
like,
you started reading it.
eh,
I immediately went like, ew. Oh,
stop reading.
oh, that's the last post in hot takes I ever write. Oh my God.
The impulse of engineers and engineering minded folks to over engineer complex systems, solutions, and products has bled into all aspects of technology and is producing consistently overly complex solutions to simple problems with consistently diminishing returns. And that feels like very true. And I think you were positing this just like in general, right? Just like in general.
Yeah,
But like
as something
as
of an absolute. Yeah.
that's like a support person, it affects our work, right? Just the overcomplication of stuff like this. So I kind of want to start at what does over engineering mean in this sense? Like take a platform, whatever platform you want to take, for example, and Colin, if you want to dive in and talk about like where your head was.
Yeah, I think a very easy example, I think that most people working in support in that audience will immediately latch on to is the ticketing system.
Mm. I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
It's probably truest for those poor souls like myself right now who have to be working in Salesforce as their ticketing
Mm,
system. It's true everywhere I've ever worked because the minute that there's this really interesting thing that happens where, I'm a big fan of like opinionated software, quote unquote, which is maybe a
mm,
dated term at this point. It might be, but there's this concept of like opinionated software that has like, product designers and engineers who are like, I think that there is a correct or at least, correct enough or at least a way that I like enough way to do the thing, whatever it is my software is built to do. There's a correct enough way to do the thing that I'm just going to build the software that does the thing in that way, and that's it. It's the reason why I don't use Todoist because I don't like their way of
I just
getting
want a
things
list,
done.
man.
I can't. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate, even though I'm not a user, I have a deep appreciation for Todoist because they built the thing the way they thought the thing should be built, and then they stopped. They just
Mm,
iterated on
yeah.
that, as opposed to play things like Salesforce, where I mean, Salesforce is sort of a complex case, but I would say even for most sales teams, the sales system is over engineered because it's so
Mm,
unopinionated. It's such a sandbox where they're just like, yeah, here's a thing, do whatever, that you have to over engineer it because you have to form your own opinions. And unfortunately, these systems get owned by, upwards of 50 different stakeholders, and they all have opinions. We all know the saying about opinions. I won't repeat it here. And then before you know it, you blink and you've got this massively bloated, over-engineered system with a bunch of like, it's perverse engineering. There's solutions that are too broad because you have to capture things from too broad of an audience. There's solutions that are too narrow because you needed to do a specific thing. You've got 30,000 fields, or the Zendesk equivalent. You've got 500,000 triggers and tags, and everyone wants to cry because the thing doesn't do the thing. And I think that, it's really to bring this back to my central point, I think there's this mimetic thing that happens, right? for people specifically who work in technology, where we see behind the curtain, we see how the software gets built, we see how the solutions are made, we've seen the Trello boards, we've seen the Asana boards, whatever, and we go like, oh yeah, okay, that's the way to build things. I see a problem and then I engineer a solution to that problem. And never do I see a problem and say, probably not a big deal.
Right. I really hadn't thought about this in terms of a ticketing system. Like, my first thought was the platform, the service, whatever that I support, right? And Jenny, I wonder if you can chime in here, but like, there's like a tangible cost of complexity.
So I'll be honest, I also was thinking of it more in terms of the platform itself, because I feel like, so the whole time you were thinking, Colin, and I'll see if I can find it and post it in Elevate later, but there was this kind of a, I'm too old. I don't know if it's a meme or a TikTok or whatever it is anymore. But it was like the whole Lord of the Rings with Gandalf and Sauron and Galadriel. They're all sitting around, and it was a scene from there. But it's them talking about Gandalf is trying to explain to all of them why the platform is just completely like falling apart, and they're all trying to look to him for answers. And he's like, it's because you just keep on wanting to do the next shiny thing
Mhm.
without spending time to make sure that the infrastructure is sound for the doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing, like what you just kept saying, Con. The thing that you're supposed to be doing, the foundation for what you're supposed to be doing needs to work. But that's not what pays the bills, unfortunately, because that doesn't bring in all the new things. It doesn't get the investors. It doesn't do the stuff that will allow you to keep going. But the ironic thing is that it just makes you weaker and weaker and weaker. And then eventually they're all looking at you like, why isn't this working? You're like, I could tell you exactly why this isn't working, but you're
The
not going
technical
to.
debt of it all, the term that
Exactly. And that's
engineers
exactly what it
hate,
is.
but like exactly what it is. Yeah.
And, but it's a really funny thing. I feel like the ticketing system, if you're asking me, my opinion on that, I feel like it's a byproduct. I feel like what happens is that you get a lot of people in a startup, at least my experiences so far, you get a lot of people who are really smart people and really driven often in order to do this, but they are so focused on getting the money, getting the funding, getting the thing off the ground so they could just go, 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 go. That they aren't able to sit and think about what are all the ramifications
For
6 months,
sure.
6 years down the line. And it's always, that's a later problem, that's a later problem, that's a later problem. And I feel like people in support are the ones that it's never a later problem for them because they are the ones dealing with it from day one, having to answer the questions to the customer.
I feel like oftentimes we do our best, maybe not in the most productive way, but we do our best to be the canary in the coal mine. Like, hey,
Right.
this
And
is happening, this is
oftentimes,
breaking. And then it's just like, it'll be fine. It'll smooth out. It'll be
right.
fine.
I feel like oftentimes the nature of being that canary in the coal mine, you also kind of become like in Greek mythology, I think there was her name was like Cassandra or something like
Hmm.
that. And she was the one who could foretell the future, but nobody would believe her. I feel like we're that because we become that boy who cried wolf a little bit, even though the fucking wolf is there. He's there. But he's maybe not going to eat you right now. He's going to eat you in an hour. So nobody's listening because you keep yelling about this thing and we've told you already to stop. But so, anyways, going back to all of that, to the ticketing system, I feel like the ticketing system and the tech stack often is a byproduct of that needing to go fast so that you put in these systems and you don't necessarily map out the journey before you implement it. And then you spend all this time going back trying to fix things that you didn't think about before. And now that ticketing system has just become this beast, along with all the other things that you're just you're putting some duct tape and WD-40 on it to make it work
Yeah.
as
I
best you
feel like
can.
Zendesk is like the ultimate example of this.
Yeah,
And you
I
all
hate
know
it.
I
So I
hate
don't.
Zendesk.
Yeah, I was gonna say I hate it. It's one of my least
Yeah.
favorites. I'll take
As a person,
Salesforce
like
over it.
it's
So
I'm a Zendesk certified admin. I know how to use it really well and I've been using it for years. It doesn't change the fact that I have watched Zendesk go from being like the thing you absolutely want to be using because they're at the forefront of being like this ticketing system to deliberately deciding not to innovate and just buying all of these companies and plugging them in and shoving them in and duct taping them in and praying to God that it works and then charging you for things that they don't charge you for. But like it's the all of these systems that they keep pushing in don't even work with each other. And it's an overcomplication of like a different kind. It's not even an actual, to me, it doesn't even feel like an engineered overcomplication. We're putting these in here, and actually, we've been having this really kind of in-depth conversation about customer loyalty recently, and it feels like a reaction to customer desires, right? Customers want this thing, or we observe that customers need these things. So we're bringing them all in, or we're seeing our competitors put these things into their platform. So we're going to figure out how
Mhm.
to get them in there
Right.
without actually engineering a real path for them to work natively. You've got to figure out the plug and play to this. Um,
I think that that gets at something really important because there are like two things that come to mind. One, Jenny, as you were talking, I was thinking about how interesting it is that in at least in my interpretation of what you were saying, in many ways it almost sounds like you were describing issues in the same way that I hear engineering teams like describe their own
yeah,
like tech debt and stacks and things like
yeah.
that. And I think that's really interesting. And also like yeah, actually you hit it on the head. Like I think there's so much it's the curse of the industry standard, right? Like Zendesk has become an industry standard application and is therefore suffering for it, or I guess I should say all of its users are suffering for it. And it's the same thing as like, as much as I hate CSAT and everybody knows it, I do think it meant something at one point. I do think it
Yeah,
was a meaningful metric at one point, but the finite point at which it loses all potential to have any meaning as a metric is when you start measuring it as an industry standard, because then you're
yeah.
not measuring your
No,
CSAT against your customers' experiences. You are measuring your CSAT against your
it's some other
competitors'
company.
CSAT scores, right? Like you're
Yeah.
playing it's a totally different game where we've moved from baseball to Quidditch. I don't know, but but
you're right.
and a lot of that has to do with I think it has to do with those some of those communication chains too,
Mm,
because you have those relationships of scale, right? When you're a smaller
mhm.
company, you're doing and everybody who's ever worked at a startup who's made its way to either a public exit or an acquisition like knows this exact trajectory and could probably tell you what, everybody who's listening to this, like pause it, map out the trajectory from point A to point D there, and then like come back and see if I hit all the points. But you start out, you're this teeny tiny company, you've got maybe you're bootstrapped, maybe you've got an angel investor around or whatever, and you've got your handful of big clients, and you bend over backwards to build and do and be whatever it is that they want you to be, right? The customer truly is king. Ugh, in that moment. And then you get a little bigger and that gets a little harder, but you're still like you're building this thing that feels intentional and you're adding on some complexity, but like it still feels like good. And especially for the support team, it feels good. You're making good on customer promises. You're building things that feel like it feels like they matter. You're making an impact. And then there's this slow shift with success. Maybe you get a series A, maybe it's a series C. Certainly at series D time, it's less about those customers who are the major ones paying the bills, because now the customers aren't the major ones paying the bills. You're not profitable on customer income. You are profitable because you have investors who have funneled a bunch of money. And so now they're the customer. Now they're the big accounts that you have to keep on board. And so you're not building the things that and look, all credit where credit is due. I've seen at least one example where like that investor board has like a really good idea, and then you build that thing, and it really does do what it needs to do, right?
Yeah.
There's
And
versions
I've
of this
certainly
cycle which are
seen
virtuous.
investors, and I've certainly seen investors claw back and say, like, you're not supposed, like, I understand that we have the money, but your customers don't like your product and you need to fix that. I've seen that
Yes,
happen. It's really
yes.
rare. I've
It's
seen it
awesome
happen
when
a
it happens.
couple of
I've seen it happen
times,
too. Yeah.
and it's
And it could be
great.
that I just wasn't privy, but I have not heard about that. I've not seen it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, what I think is a little bit more common, at least a little bit more common, is that the opposite happens, right? Again,
Mhm.
you get 50 people in a room, they've all got an opinion. You have to build all 50 opinions, and then everything disappears. Or especially in SaaS, because we've gone from this, we live in a subscription economy and operate in one, especially in technology, that you can't just build the product and hope people purchase new license every 6 versions or whatever. You have to keep them on board, so you have to keep the old customers, who are usually the 100% the responsibility of support, and then you have to expand and expand and expand and grow your user base and grow your market reach and grow, you until your ICP, your ideal customer profile, is just like, the marketer can just write everybody. Who's our ICP? It's everyone. Everyone
Yeah.
is our ICP,
Yeah.
and you can't do that. I don't think.
Yeah. I guess this is a complexity thing, but like, are we building a system that's working the way it's supposed to work versus a system that's working, right? Like, I think like McDonald's ice cream machines are a good example. McDonald's is literally not allowed to fix their ice cream machines. The company that makes the ice cream machines has a contract with them that says they are not allowed to do it. They can only get them fixed by this company, which takes time and effort for them to come out and do it, which is why McDonald's ice cream machines are always broken down. But that's how the system works. They built the
That's how
system
it's
to
supposed
work
to
that
work.
way.
Right.
And like Apple is another really good example of that. You can't fix anything with your Apple computer anymore. I used to mod my laptop myself all the time, and they have made it impossible to do. If you want to do that, you need to go to them and pay them to do it, right? So I do wonder sometimes if the over complexity has gotten to a place where it's purposeful, and we just don't talk about it because we want to build in that reliability system.
I think it's purposeful. I think it's that it's not,
Well
it's kind
thought,
of like,
just like not thought out.
it's not even that. So I don't even know that it's not thought out. I think that you kind of just hit the nail on the head. What our perspective is tends to be aligned with our customers' perspective. When I'm saying ours, support.
So we're
And so for us, a lot of times, and this is so hard to get out of this, but I'm guilty of this all the time, is we're sitting there going, the thing doesn't work. Why are we putting the Bang& audio system on the hoopty? Because the wheels aren't really working so well, right? The folks that made it, they're not necessarily having the same goal. So it's
right,
not
Right,
that
right.
right.
Because
it's
they're
not
like, wait, you're still using that to dry?
Yes, yeah,
right,
exactly, exactly,
right.
exactly.
Whoa, yeah, right. They're like, several cycles ahead, or they're doing something entirely different. Or
And then they didn't communicate it to you.
a product manager goes up, like, comes along and says, like, well, okay, I understand that it doesn't accelerate, but do the brakes still work? Because, like, if
Yes.
it doesn't
Well,
accelerate, that's
these
maybe
features work.
okay. But
Right.
but if the brakes don't work, we got to fix that.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's
Yeah.
still moving. Exactly. Like it's still
Right,
moving. So
right,
therefore, like you're kind of complaining about nothing that you're saying that it
That
doesn't
matters to
accelerate
me.
because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
still
right,
yeah.
going.
right,
And
right.
so just, work with what you got. But for us, we're sitting there like, no, it's supposed to do these things. This is what we sold it on, and this is what we're telling people. And I just don't think that the different folks who are involved are aligned. They're just not.
I think that's 100% true. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I am such a cheerleader for a really healthy cross-functional
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
with healthy feedback loops and like meetings that actually matter.
Meetings.
And
Begging someone to have a
and
meeting.
transparency and documentation and people working out in the open. It's like it's become a catchphrase of mine wherever I work. I run around screaming like, clean your windows. No one can see what your work looks like. Clean your
Yeah.
windows. First to my department and then to others because, you know, you don't want to be a hypocrite. But yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And I think also, and I don't know if this is like a problem that results from that or if it's like a different sort of separate problem. I think we do spend a lot of time. Again, we all kind of get the engineering bug, and we spend a lot of time with a desire to fix problems without necessarily thinking through fixing the broader problem. We become tinkerers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a neighbor. I grew up next to a neighbor who was a tinkerer, and he spent the better part of 10 years restoring a 67 Chevy Nova in canary yellow, and he finally did it one day, and it was amazing. But that car like went through so many iterations. If I guarantee you, if he was taking a circuitous path, because he was like, "Well, I'm gonna fix this thing, and then I changed my mind. I'm gonna fix that thing. I'm gonna fix this," thing.
Yeah.
And there was not like a solid plan that was like, "Okay, there is a overarching problem here," and we're back to the
Yes.
hoopty. The overarching problem here is that the engine does not start. So
Yes.
let me get this to a point where the engine does not start before I figure out why, the air conditioner doesn't work or
Correct.
the
Yeah.
or put seats on it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like we kind of like try and
But can you
build all the things
jumpstart
at
it
once.
if you're like running and like pushing?
Right,
Because then you're
right,
still not going to fix it.
right. Right. Well, and there are times I think where that sort of like minimum viability does work,
Yes.
but that's usually, in
If
my
your
opinion, for
overall
like,
goal is to fix the larger problem, right?
right, right, right. And I think this takes me back to kind of like the ticketing system, right? There's all these, and I think about this for large teams especially because there's this, again, like these problems of scale. Your problems when you're small are very different from your problems when you're large because, one of the problems that comes along when you're large is there is just a naturally, I think, eroding sense of trust on a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger team and even on a bigger and bigger support team, right? And so your problems on a team of five where you're like, we're all drowning. Is everyone drinking water? Like, did everybody take a lunch today? Who's taking a vacation in August? So I know I don't overbook, these issues and like, how do we scale what we're doing? These issues sort of dissipate a little bit and new issues crop up that like nobody likes, especially as very empathetic leaders and managers, because you have to start thinking like, okay, I can't totally trust these three new
Yeah.
hires to like do the thing. So how do I make them? And that's
Yeah.
where that complexity starts to get introduced because you have to think like, okay, well, how do I build a system that enforces this behavior? And I think that's part of the issue that I'm bringing up when I talk about this is like that pull of technology to either create a false reality, a false interpretation of reality, or an
Mm-hmm.
unenforceable enforced reality,
Mm-hmm.
where what we really ought to be doing is not asking ourselves, well, how do I create a system that enforces this behavior? We say, how do I create a system that encourages
Encourages the
the
behavior.
right
Yeah.
behavior, that nudges people to the right behavior, and then also gives me some amount of insight into when that doesn't happen, right? Because there's like, I think the example that I'm referring to here is like those pernicious requests that add friction point after friction point after friction point after friction point. Like it takes 17 clicks to close a ticket, right? That's the kind
Yeah.
of stuff I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to push on you just for a second. I'm not saying that what you're saying is false or wrong because I think you're right. I will say, like, I've been lucky that I've gotten to use other systems that allowed me to work in that better, I think. My frustration was I can't remember if you said it or somebody else in the channel said it, but I feel like a lot of times we're looking for technology to solve problems that technology shouldn't be solving.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Colin definitely said
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
was you.
Totally agree.
And I kind of feel like this might be one of them because one of the things that frustrated me the most in this complexity was I need to hire people that I can trust.
Right.
And sometimes those people are not the cheapest people
Right.
because and not because like you don't like one of the things that always just drive me nuts was like, well, find some person who's brand new and you can just mold them into that
Well,
rock
yeah, because
star.
support's an entry level job, and so you should be able
Right.
to hire anyone off the
Anyone
street
off
and
the
out of
street.
college, and so it's
And
fine.
it's like, sure, I can do that if I have all these things in place. Not a problem. When we have people who are quite literally changing the way things work day by day,
Daily.
we can't keep the documentation up, nor should we at this point. We need people who are going to have those critical thinking skills to know when to do X versus Y.
What to check,
Hmm.
where to look, who to talk to,
Right.
where to go,
And
without you having to tell them to do it. Yeah.
and
Yes.
it's so hard when you're managing a department where you've got all these different things and you know that you need a certain type of person, but you can't afford 10 of those. You can maybe afford one of those, and the rest you're going to have to bring up to that. And you're relying on all these other things. That's when it does get really frustrating when you're spending so much energy on things like that versus is the ticketing system working the way that I need
Well,
it to do? Am
that's
I
what I mean about like the real tangibility of like the complexity. And this, I think this is the thing that we don't talk about enough, is that as a systemically underfunded org, we can't hire those more senior, more knowledgeable people. So we rely on having entry level people or newer people or people who are career changing, which is great. It's fine. But the cost of the complexity of a system means that I have to have really detailed, great documentation to train those people and keep those people up to date all of the time. And I don't have the other teams, the cross-functional teams, don't want to keep up communication that I need to make sure that I know what the is changing with the product, and like that communication is broken. And there's all of this, honestly, like kind of emotional debt that we start incurring because
huge?
we can't, the over complexity of this system that you're creating, the team that has to support it cannot keep up, and then it's still our
Right.
fault.
Right.
And
Well,
then
and
sorry, go ahead, Colin.
I was just going to say, I think in many ways we are actually very much saying that the same thing there, because that's sort of exactly my point, right? We build this sort of locked down system that takes 17 clicks to close a ticket. Like I don't make that because I think that I'm working with highly capable people who are going to make good
Yeah.
decisions that I don't have to watch and
Right.
micromanage. That's not why I build that. And that's the reason why that's my example of like a piece of technology that's solving a problem that technology has no business solving, because I can build all the pieces of that system and make it do the thing. I cannot build a system that explains itself to people and says, this is why you're doing the thing. This is why I'm making you click the button. Because if I could
I
do that,
still
then I
have to
wouldn't
do
have
the
to build the thing that makes you click
documentation.
the button, right?
Exactly.
Well, and even if I wrote documentation, I think again, if unless you it's that age-old adage that I think we all repeat in support by and large, which is like, look, I can teach you how to support the product. I can teach you what the product is. I can teach you the tech skills. It's a lot harder to teach you to be an adult, to be a good collaborator, to be a good team member, and to think about conversations you're having with customers at like multiple levels and touch points at a time, right? Like it's even I see this in working with highly technical support people. Um,
Yeah. No,
Absolutely
that's
not.
these
not how that
people are good
works.
at thinking about chess games like chess. They are
Yes.
not good at thinking about conversations like
Conversations. Yeah.
chess. I
Yeah.
need that person.
Yeah. And those people exist. Those people who
Yeah.
can do both exist, but like Jenny said, they're expensive because they are like they're experienced. They've been
Right.
doing
They've
this a
gone
long
through
Yeah.
time.
it. They've gone
Yeah.
through it enough that they've
Well,
been
and
able to hone those skills because you don't start off
right,
with those usually right away.
right, right. Yep.
It's like our friend Ben always says, like, soft skills are not soft skills. They are hard skills. You have to learn
Correct.
them and you have to work them. They are a muscle. You need to work them all the time. If you don't, you lose them. They atrophy at some point, and like we have to stop treating those soft skills like soft skills.
So I think one of the things that has always gotten like a bee at my bonnet is that I think everybody, and the more that I've like branched out into the networks where I only I think it was a year or two ago that I even found all of you folks. And it was just like, oh my gosh, everybody else is experiencing the same thing.
We all do.
You know what I mean? It's quite frankly, it was for me, I was floored and it gave me this new sense of confidence because what I had been experiencing for so long before I found these networks is that the rest of the company looks at you, no matter which one you're at, looks at you like they might really respect you and they might think that you're really smart and they might believe that what you're doing. And I think those things are all true. But on some level, they just cannot get their minds wrapped around how much the emotional debt is, how much big the problem is, and how
You're
expensive the
blowing this out
problem
of
is.
proportion. And then
Correct.
once you meet other
Always.
people who have that same experience, it's like, oh shit, I'm not crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even had earlier this week, I'm going to go on a slight tangent before I come back. So this is no mystery. I've been looking for a different role and I have some people who, or they're my professional references. And one of them, I was talking to him yesterday and he even brought it up again, just like, oh, well, when it comes to like what your weaknesses are, he was talking about what he thought my strengths and my weaknesses. He's like, it was around the reporting things before they actually need to be reported or
Mm.
talking about them out of proportion. And this is somebody who is in a different department and has a different thought process to it. And I just remember like we always used to butt heads about these things. This was not anything new. And I just kind of chuckled to myself because while I take that person's feedback and I've tried to own it and do what I can with it, it still goes back to I have not yet found a way to fully communicate why I know that the problem that I brought up then or now is not being represented to the way that the company sees
Hmm.
um, the importance of
Yeah, the
why.
urgency is like not the
Right.
same.
Why I am choosing this hill to die on, and what has gone into that thought process before saying, this is where I plant my flag. And believe me, I think all of you don't plant that flag very often. That flag, you probably tell your team over and over again why you're not planting that flag. So when
Yeah.
you do finally plant that flag and, the company still isn't able to see it, I've been up late at night trying to think, how can I communicate this differently better? And I don't know again if there's an answer sometimes.
Think for what it's worth, the best answer I've ever arrived at is not one where I get what I want out of that conversation,
Yeah.
actually.
100%.
Um, the the best version of that I've ever arrived at, that's actually like come to a closed loop, is one where I've said near verbatim, like, okay, so I need you to understand that what you're asking me to do is to light the ship on fire and then tell you if it burns. So I just need you to know that that's what you're asking me to do, so that, in 6 or 7 weeks, and you come to me and you say, "Hey, what smells like smoke? Why is the ship on fire?" We
It's the
both
thing that
remember
you
this
told me to burn.
conversation took
Yeah.
place. That's all.
Yeah.
And so I'll go do the thing, or I'll drop the rope on this problem, or whatever it is. And you just, you say that, and I at least in the situation where I said this thing, like I had exhausted all of my nerves, and so I said it very calmly, maybe like scary calmly, if I had to guess. And that worked to my advantage in massive ways because sure enough, 6 or 7 weeks later, that's exactly what happened. And, look, I was working on a great team with people that just had different perspectives, but they came to me and they said, like, look, you know what? You were right.
Yeah.
And it's hard because then you don't get to take that with you necessarily to your next company.
Yeah. How do you,
That's
and
the hard
this is
part.
like a whole other conversation. I think Steph and I talked about this when we were talking about like bad job bingo stuff, when they ask you to prove like how you were successful and why you moved up. It's like I can't, because those are all conversations that I had, and I can't prove to you that I had these conversations and how successful they were, and or it's proprietary information, it's IP, and I can't show it to
Right.
you, and it's really frustrating. But like all of this, like I think interestingly, all of this kind of boils down to the overcomplexity of like the conversations that we end up having, or like the communication systems that start existing because we build one, a product that's maybe a little too overcomplicated, right? One, or two, we use systems, we use tech stacks, etc., that are more complicated than they need to be at this point. Jira used to kind of be pretty straightforward. Now, what is it? I don't know, because everyone customizes it to what they need it for, and then 5 teams are using it a completely different way. And then that overcomplicates how our teams communicate, because no one's using these tools the same way. None of us are on the same, like, what do I want to call it? None of us are working toward the same goal, which is absurd when you're working at the same company and should be working toward the same goal. Support is often working toward the goal of, I'm trying to help the customer be successful using the product, when product and engineering are often on the goal of, well, we're trying to build this new feature that we think is going to be neat, and overcomplicating the system further. Yeah, I think we're
Think
just like hitting this wall of everything is complicated now,
well,
for what reason?
I'll maybe we can kind of like tag it here,
Yeah, yeah,
and who
yeah.
knows, maybe we'll do another one on this topic, because I really like where we're going with this, but I think I have a like a gut feeling, and it kind of touches everything, and it's that promise of a guarantee. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same promise of a guarantee that I was talking about with the over-engineered ticketing systems that guarantee behaviors that should just be trained, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trained or taught, or even maybe just base level. Like you should be hiring people who have those skills and abilities already. But we need to guarantee that something is going to happen, right? We need to. It's the same with crappy voice of the customer metrics that we all complain about in our community, like CSAT and NPS. They don't actually do anything, but they're operating in search of this guarantee. That's like someone out there is saying like, I need you to guarantee me, tell me how much of our revenue is guaranteed to come back, please. I need to know that. I need that assurance. When really I'm not sure it's
Yeah.
guaranteeable.
No.
Um, and what's really interesting is what I'm realizing only just now about that story that I just told, is that was me making a bet,
Yeah.
not a guarantee. I was making a bet. And I think that we there's this thing about people who work in support, is that we don't make bets by and large. We're guarantee people. And so because we're
Right. We
guarantee people,
like to be guarantee people, but I think we
well,
make bets more
We
than
don't
we
like to make false
realize.
promises.
we
Yeah.
want to be guarantee people, right? We
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
nature guarantee people, right? And we work with all these people who, I think, as much as we've learned to see engineers as engineers and salespeople as salespeople, these people have learned to see us as support people as well. And so I think what's really interesting, it's just an idea, is there's that pernicious oh, here I go using that word again. Sorry.
That's the
That
third time you
that
used it, by the way.
problematic third, God, it's a problem, right? The problem of asking to be guaranteed something that is not necessarily guaranteeable. It's a little fuzzier than all that. And I think maybe that's the answer, is instead of bringing things to people and teams and individuals and collaborators and saying like, here's this fuzzy thing, I've got it, and it's a gut feeling, to be a little bit more direct and just say, look, it's got this, here is a bet. I am betting on this thing. We're going to stop doing this process and nothing bad's going to happen. We're going to stop ticking this box and nothing bad's going to happen. We're going to not build this aspect of the new feature and nothing bad's going to happen. I'm just starting to make those bets.
I think to wrap it up, like, I think we all, there, all of this is so much more complicated than I think we realized when we started this conversation, because I think we all came to it thinking about different meanings
Mhm.
of complexity in like our lives as support people, and somehow still came out to support versus product. I don't know how we do that.
Well,
It's a talent.
hold on, because I actually love product.
I love product. It doesn't mean that like our work doesn't always, it's
Yeah.
always gonna butt,
Right.
right?
Well, I still laugh about the time that I told a VP of product once, like, well, I mean, just as, like an aside, I was like, like our positions are like by nature adversarial, and he was like,
Yeah.
I don't know about adversarial, and I was like, no,
Like,
dude, come on.
it's, yes,
It's like it's
100%.
healthy though.
Yeah. And I think it makes the product better when it's like a healthy and like,
So yes, I think you're right. It's
it
more
can,
complicated than
depending
any
on,
of us are.
yeah, depending on how your relationship is working, like I've had incredible relationships with like our product team, and I think that made our product better because I could have a meeting every week and say like, this is happening, like, oh well, we'll fix this and we'll do this, and then still have those conversations like, well, why are you doing this? People don't want this. Well, we're doing it because the investors think it'll be a good idea. Like I've had both those conversations with the same person. But I think like in the situation where we're talking about the complexities of teams and communications and processes and systems, it's very interesting to me that it still manages to boil down to like how these teams specifically kind of butt up against each other. Even if we started our conversation with ticketing systems, it still gets us there. In the end, like the solution is, well, the question I guess for the solution is like, how do we simplify it? How do we get people to agree that one, simplification needs to happen, and then agree on what the simplifications are? Like, what do we cut out? Like, Colin, you were saying this, like, what do we cut out? What do we stop doing to just get us to a place where we're like, this is what has to happen for us to be successful and move forward?
Well, yeah, and sometimes you really just have to like. I think it gets sometimes complexity gets to a point where you really do just have to nuke it and start over. Unfortunately, that's the only way to do
And I've done that.
things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But I think like a really healthy way to start to approach reducing that complexity is transparency. The antidote to complexity is often transparency, because it's
Yes.
hard to create a whole lot of perverse incentives and like fixes for problems that don't really exist when there is transparency across the team and good communication, healthy feedback loops, all of these things. And so ironically, it takes some amount of complexity to build those systems,
Yeah. But you
but
do
I
it
would
once and then
much
it's there.
exactly, exactly. That's what I was just going to say is I would much rather spend the time to go and develop those relationships and build those healthy feedback loops and those Venn diagrams that need to exist within an organization than to spend a lot of time adding complexity to try and shoehorn what I have left, which is technology solutions to problems that really ultimately need to be hashed out by humans in a meeting or a document or an email.
I
Yeah, we'll be here
I
forever talking
would
about D&D.
love to like, because we started this on ticketing systems, I actually want to have a conversation about that later, and we can do that later, and we can come back to that later. But I think that is in just agreeing to be transparent and not silo your information, not silo why you built this system, or not complain about having to build the system to explain why something works this way, is at least in the short term how we like get to a place where we can at least move past the over complication of at least communicating within these systems, right? Yeah, I think that's
And if
right.
somebody somewhere can do a little pre-planning, long-term planning, journey mapping of some
You want
kind.
a roadmap? Come on.
No, I didn't say that word, okay?
I'm just kidding.
But no, I mean, I just that's it. And you can't think of everything. You just
No,
can't. But
not for everything.
a
You
little
and
bit
that's
of
the point.
planning.
You're gonna have MVPs and you're gonna like you have to move forward.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever gonna be finished. You especially if you
No,
work at a startup, nothing will ever be finished. You're gonna keep
sure.
moving forward and
But
forward and
if
forward.
you could just spend, I mean, I will say this till I blue in the face. 5 extra minutes of planning. 5 extra minutes sometimes is all you need to just go, did we think of everything that we can possibly think of right now? Because
Right
I
now.
think it's
Yeah.
right now. It's too quick sometimes for people to say, can't think of everything, let's just go. And it's like, we can't think of everything, but we could probably think of 3 things. I bet you anything. Like we could
Yeah.
probably think of 3.
Yeah.
And if you could do that each time, I feel like that would be a huge, huge help.
Yeah. So next time we'll
Cool.
specifically talk about the complexities of Zendesk.
Well, don't go
Maybe
on
not
Zendesk some
specifically
more.
Zendesk,
Poor Zendesk.
but I'm kind of interested in talking about how some things want to be anti-Zendesk and like whether or not they are, and how complex they actually are or not, and how much they're actually clawing back. This is a really great
Mm.
conversation, you guys.
Yeah, this was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'll
We'll
talk about
chat
whatever
with
you want
you
me to
guys
talk
again.
about because I've got so many opinions.
I will talk